keepers, they varied over the years, you know. I mean, first of all, I told you earlier the instruction, they didn't even have any instructions. And it got a little bit better under Pleasanton. He had instructions, but there's nobody going around making sure they were doing it. And some of those inspections I told you about in the 1830s and 40s that they wrote up, David Porter and some of the others, a keeper missing, 12-year-old boy in charge. Stairs want painting. No spare lamps in the lantern room. Keeper doesn't think it's necessary to light up until it gets good and dark. Keeper, retired blacksmith, can't read and write. So this was a horror story. In that book of 744 pages I told you about, there's a chapter in there of all of these lighthouses, including this one, of an inspection. You know, sometimes they're like this, sometimes it's a half a page. But it's a horror story of the shape our lighthouses were in right up until 1852 when the Lighthouse Board came in. And when they came in, they squared it away. They had to write down how many hours of fog, how many cords of wood in the fog signal or tons of coal if they use coal, visitors to the station. The keeper had all of that stuff to write down, to keep track of. They had to watch the light at night, of course. Theoretically, there was always supposed to be somebody up there, sometimes not. Sometimes the keeper would sleep and, if necessary, would put a little mirror outside his bedroom window so he could roll over and look out and see, oh yeah, it's still lit. And sometimes they did. It all depended on the keeper. As I said, they're all different. So they not only had to watch the light and clean the stairs, but they had to paint it all inside too, all the way to the top, as well as the outside. They have these lantern rooms have these little handholds here, one for the keeper, and so he could use his hand to either clear the ice off or wash the storm panes, which are what we call the windows, or paint the astragals, which are the metal bars. And if they had a rotating lens, they had a first order would have a 190-pound weight that they had to wind up every 4 hours. And the reason every 4 hours, they had the ability, I mean, Leonardo da Vinci could have rigged up something to go for 4 days probably. But they wanted to make sure the guy was up at least once in 4 hours. So every 4 hours, and I heard stories where they had, some lighthouses will have the weight coming all the way down, as it's a tall tower like this. So the keeper would lay down where the weight would end up off to one side, and he put a board on his chest. When the weight hit that board, it would put pressure on his chest and wake him up. And then you go back up and wind it up. Games, we all play them. The lantern room is really a tool. After we got rid of those crude lanterns with the copper tops on them and stuff, and they started putting, in the 1850s, all of our lighthouses had this modern lantern. And it needs air in there for three things. You need air for combustion, whatever fuel, by this time it was lard oil. You need air in there for to keep the condensation off the windows, and I'll show you in a minute. And then you needed air in there to take the fumes from the lamp up to this ball vent, which is hollow, and away. The wind would take it away. So what they had was they have vents, either in the deck or in the sidewalls, that they would control. You didn't want a big, heavy wind coming in, but you needed air. So if you had a northeaster coming this way, you closed those and you opened these over here. And as the air came in, the air going through there would create a vacuum, and it would bring this air in alongside the storm panes and out. And that kept the condensation off the windows. And the same thing, the fumes from the lantern would go up through a glass tube and then through a metal tube up to here and out. So very efficient. They tuned this lantern room like the instrument that it was. Handhold, this is British. We didn't have any like this, but I thought it was kind of fanciful, so I took this picture in England. British handhold for the keeper. Every day they had to have everything polished and ready for 10 o'clock, by 10 o'clock in the morning, theoretically. And they had to oil, of course, if they had a rotating optic. They had some sort of a clockworks in there, and they had to clean that. They had to clean the windows. The lens was cleaned with a turkey feather brush every day. Once a week it was cleaned with spirits of vinegar, which is spirits of wine, which is vinegar. And once a year it was polished with a very fine rouge. Here are these vents. Here's a vent, a fourth order type of lantern on the deck, on the wall, and here's one from probably a first order. And also these big lantern rooms with a first order lens often had glass prisms in the deck to allow light to get down to the workspace, which is below the main deck of the lantern room. And here they are. So this is probably a first or second order lens. And they all had these charming vents for rain spouts. They were either bear's head, eagles, or gargoyles on every section of the outside of the dome. Brushes. I was telling you about brushes. Listen to the brushes. Now this is after 1852. And this is from the Instructions to Lighthouse Keepers, 1902, but I also have an 1881. There are chimney or bottle brushes, sash brushes, paint brushes, and how many of them there are. Whitewash brush, scrubbing brush, hand something brush, feather brushes, sweeping brush, wolf head brush, and a silver plate brush. And they all had their own reason for existence, with brass that had to be shined. And it's too bad we have too much light in here, but this is a schematic of the various tools that the station was authorized to have and supplied. And one of them is the keeper's box here. Each keeper had his own little box. I'll show you that right there, that they would take up to the lantern room, and it had rags in it, and it had rouge for polishing the lens, brass polish, scissors for trimming the wick when they were in the fuel business. There's a screen in here to get the impurities out of oil. So they all had that little service box. And as I said, everything had to be apple pie order by 10 in the morning. That's one of the first order lamps, a 5-wick lamp. There are 5 concentric wicks. The biggest one was this big around. And that's an oil canister. Now I love this. Here's an outfit list. You can't read it, so I'll just read. These articles are to be required. And they've got service box. That's what I just showed you, service box. A spirit level, a dripping pan, 2 dust pans, brass, a picking instrument, 1 lamp feeder, and down here at the very bottom, 2 sets of linen curtains to be used exclusively in the lantern room and never in the keeper's house. That's what it says. Can't you just see Mrs. Lighthouse Keeper? Bill, could I have that other set of lantern sheets? I'd like to cut that up with pink and scissors. Make curtains for baby Elizabeth's room. So they obviously had a reason for putting that there. But they did have a spare set of curtains, and they drew these curtains during the daytime. Sometimes they were on a rod around the inside of the lantern room, and that kept the sun's rays out, which kept the heat off the lens, so the litharge, which held the prisms in place, didn't dry out as quickly. And the prisms would fall out, of course. All of these prisms are individual. They're set in these brass frames with 3 wooden wedges on each side, and then this litharge, which is white lead and linseed oil, holding it in place. The keepers, the only thing they got was a sink built in. And in later years, I can't tell you exactly when, 1860s, 70s maybe, they got a stove. And the head keeper got a clock, lighthouse service clock. He got 2 lamps. The assistant keeper got 1 lamp. That was it. All the rest of their furniture, I've had lighthouses call and say, where did they get the furniture? How much? They got the furniture from Aunt Harriet when she died. They built the furniture, maybe. They inherited it, they bought it. So all of this, that was not furnished by the Lighthouse Service. Now here's some pay. In 1812, this is a head keeper. I'm using just head keepers. Actually, it was $333.33 and I've got a thing where I can interpret this, and it comes out to about $6,000 a year, which is a lot of money back then for a year. I mean, they had no cable, no electric bills, no gas bills, magazines, they didn't have anything like that. So that's a lot of money. And often, and as everybody did in the 19th century and before that, they grew a lot of their own vegetables and herbs, and people usually had a cow or pig, or maybe they had chickens. So they supplied a lot of their own food. That's what they did in this country, even if you weren't a keeper. In 1870s, around 1874, they issued these libraries, traveling libraries. Each one had a number on it, 1524. And it closed up. It had a brass latch, and on either side are handles that fold in. And when the lighthouse tenders went around to these lighthouses, except for the Great Lakes, hopefully once a quarter. And if the district inspector wasn't there to inspect, the captain of the ship inspected. And he might look at you give him a brush because the brush had just worn right down. Could I have a replacement for this? You go, yeah, and he'd strike it out and he'd write in, give you a new one. And then he'd give you this one back and write stipple brush. You can use that for making stencils. But anyways, they got this library, and it had novels, scientific book of poems, a hymnal, probably a Bible, and they would deliver this library not to all light stations, maybe not to this one. All this was probably remote in 1870, probably. But island light stations are those up and down the coast that were a long way away. And they would leave them for a month, 2 months, 3 months, a quarter. And then they would come back after that, and they'd give them a new one and take the other one down to the next light station. So that was a little for the esprit de corps. This was the first tender built. It's the Schuberg, 176 feet long. It was built for the West Coast. It was a side wheeler, had sails. They didn't trust steam quite yet, 1876. And it had a water cannon on here in case the Indians, the Umpqua River Indians up in Oregon attacked the ship, they could put hot water on them. It eventually went on under the Revenue Service and served up in Alaska for a while as a revenue cutter after we won Alaska. And just quickly on the tenders, they're all named after flowers, trees, bush. I was on the Sweetbriar in Alaska and the Ironwood in Honolulu. There's the maple over here. And the buoy, they did everything. They worked buoys, shore raids. We supplied mail and movies and food every 2 weeks to the isolated stations in Alaska. We take the fish and wildlife out, like the Hawaiian archipelago, so they can go aboard and count the birds. We take buoys out for NOAA out there, weather buoys. Department of Defense. I was in Vietnam on a buoy tender, executive officer on one. Ice breaking. And as I got down there, whatever. One time in Alaska, we had to take a whole deck load of hay out to Gus Davis Island because the cows were starving and they couldn't get a plane in. So here we are. Here's the Coast Guard with its hay. Oh, it's fun stuff. This is the Madrona. It's an early tender in San Francisco Bay. So they did a lot of everything, and they transported the keepers and the keepers' belongings between light stations. The Sequoia, working a 938 buoy, it's 9 feet in diameter, 38 feet long. And there's some other tenders. Look at these side wheeler. This was like in the Sounds. New York Harbor had one of these, by the way. In the Sounds of North Carolina, they would have those side wheelers. They had China. I've got a couple of pieces of this stuff's really expensive, as you can imagine. The keepers didn't have this, but the district inspector would, or the skipper of a lightship, or a tender would have that. After the Lighthouse Board came in, they all flew this flag. All the lightships, tenders, even smaller vessels would fly that flag. And this is the district inspector's flag. And if you saw that flag, the inspector's aboard. He's gonna come aboard and inspect me. Quick, Martha, polish up that coffee pot. So that was the district inspector's flag. And they all originated right over here on Staten Island at the General Depot. That's where they bought flags. All the lenses from Europe went to Staten Island to the General Depot, uncrated, checked for completeness, recreated, and sent around the country. All the oil was checked for viscosity and pureness. All the brass implements, the brass dustpans, were made on Staten Island, and they're all stamped USLHE, U.S. Lighthouse Establishment. 3RD-DIST, 3rd District. So here's a stamp of this flag. You want a district depot, buoy tender, a depot would order 20 flags. They would come from Staten Island, and then these flags would go out to the light stations. And here's a tender coming in. This is in Hawaii. That's the kukui, which happens to be a nut that the Hawaiians crushed and used for oil. So it's very appropriate. It's got the name kukui. It's coming into this stiff-legged crane dock, but it's a small boat that's coming in here because this guy can't get in there. So they had to deliver bags of coal up in Alaska or wherever, and all the goodies and the oil by small boat. There's another one on the California coast, Piedras Blancas. And sometimes there was even no small one, and this Northern California light station was totally isolated. It's a 2.5-hour walk in to this, and there's no dock. So they had to come in by small boat like this to deliver the supplies right in through the surf, and occasionally they capsized, and occasionally people drowned. And all of the boats and the vessels and the lighthouse service had this little lighthouse on the bow. It was kind of a half round made out of metal. Charming little thing. I mean, it's so, for a government entity to have that kind of charm. Here is some other, this is the Farallon light stations. Mail day out on the Farallons, the mail's being delivered, and the keeper's there giving out from the bag. And of course, some eras in some stations, all lightships obviously, but some stations, they would be delivered food. Depend on the station, where it was located. And it's not a lighthouse, it's a light station, by the way. So this station here has, each person has a pound of beef a week, 2 pounds of pork, codfish, mutton, bacon, ham, sugar, pickles, vinegar, salt, pepper, and mustard. Whoa! You think Julia Child could make a Thanksgiving dinner with that? I don't think so. There's no oregano there, and I don't see any basil. But they had their gardens, and this is Northern California. It's a fog signal station at Humboldt Bay, and you can see the keeper's kid out here. He's been tending to the garden. They fished. They were near water, of course, so they could fish. Most stations had a boat, sometimes to get to shore, especially up in Maine. They had these little pea pods, and that's how they went to get their supplies. Remember the keeper that died at the Boston Lighthouse? He was ashore getting supplies. Back, capsized, gone. Animal husbandry, they had pigs, and this is a keeper in Northern California, that same station that they came in by boat. And if it's a 2.5-hour walk in there, and it's very steep because I've been there, it must have been a bear to get those mules in and out of that station right down on the beach. Keeper had to keep these logs. Now this log right here, and you can't see it, this log, this page is 1906, and it's from the Lime Point Lighthouse on the north side of the Golden Gate Bridge. The bridge wasn't there then, 1906. And this is, the keepers could say anything they wanted. They had these logs that they kept that had to be exact. How much oil did you use? How much wood? Areas of fog, blah, blah, blah. But they had a general log. Sometimes they just said wind northwest 10 knots. That's it. But every now and then they'd launch into a poem, or the assistant keeper's wife gave birth to a bouncing baby boy, 9 pounds, 10 ounces, don't know how she did it, and on and on and on and on. Or shame on that man that shot shot President McKinley. And but a lot of times it was very simple. So here's this log, 1906, April 12th. You remember what happened, 1906? San Francisco? Yeah, and fire. So I'm imagining, here's a couple of researchers. Hey, Bob, you know that light station right across from, I'll bet we could find, it's over there, yeah, Lime Point. We could find the log and get a great description of what those keepers saw, because they were sitting there looking right at San Francisco. That's a good idea. Let's go to the National Archives. So here's a page. You can't read it, but it says, working on the trail to the station, Sunday, nothing. Whitewashing the station, the Madrono landed 9 tons of coal. Earthquake, 5:26 a.m., San Francisco on fire. The next day, ditto. Ditto? Ditto? That's all you got to say? And then he says the next day is light earthquake, ditto, Sunday. They don't work on Sunday. And then working on the trail to the station. I mean, here's this event, this whole damn city burns down, and all they say is ditto. Oh, well. How verbose. But this was just to show you the furniture and stuff, and to tell you what I've already told you. So there's the keeper of Tree Point in Alaska. The keeper and his assistant, and it's Thanksgiving dinner, and he's invited the assistant and his wife in for dinner. The keeper ran it just like, for the most part, just like the captain of a ship. It went from the assistant keepers to the keeper to the district inspector to headquarters. That was the chain of command once the Lighthouse Board came in 1852, and pretty much through the civilian era too. But there were, they weren't all angels. Believe me, they weren't all angels. I got an 1899 letter from the first assistant keeper at the Pigeon Point Lighthouse in California, and it's typed, and it's to the district inspector. He's gone around the keeper, and he said, I did not swear at the keeper and abuse his wife. He swears at me, and not only that, last week when I relieved him, there were empty whiskey bottles all around the lantern room. And do you know, sir, that he gives out lighthouse service pipes to the farmers in the county? And he just wants me gone so his friend, the second assistant, which is under him, can be promoted to first assistant. Well, I didn't have the other side of the letter. I just had that one letter from him. But about a year later, the guy that was the keeper at Pigeon Point now shows up here at Lime Point, the one I just read you the log from, looking at San Francisco. And 2 years later, I've got the log, and it says in the log, in 1902, 1903, it said, this entry was written by Commander Nichols, head of the 12th Lighthouse District. This entry is made by the commander. The keeper was found dead on the rocks, drunk probably, returning from Sausalito last night. By the keeper, the assistant keeper's son found the keeper dead on the rocks below the lighthouse. So he was coming back down the trail, probably schnockered out of his mind. Remember the whiskey bottles found in the lantern room? They all weren't angels. Fog signals. Bell fog signals in the 1830s and 1840s. Then in the 40s and 50s, they tried a caloric steam engine invented by Dayball of Connecticut in the Beavertail Lighthouse to get some steam. Oh, before that, they had a horse either go around in a circle or on a treadmill. pistons would go up and down in a big tank, press the air, pull a chain, and it went through a ship's whistle. Air. Then they went to steam. And so they had a steam fog signal. It was in Sandy Hook. They built a station here in 1865, and they had the first siren. Most fog signal stations went through, every 10 hours, they went through a ton of coal or 2/3 of a cord of wood, every 10 hours. So we had a siren in the 1850s. 1865 here at Sandy Hook, they had the siren. Before that was the trumpet. It was a 48 long piece of metal, 2 inches by 1 inch, that vibrated when air or steam went over it. So it was a trumpet, then it was the siren, and then around 1910-ish, we got everybody knows the two-tone and the single-tone foghorn, which was invented in Canada. And went to New Jersey, by the way. Hey, New Jersey again. The Leslie Corporation was moved to New Jersey from Canada. The keeper's uniform didn't have a uniform like this until 1883, 84, when for the esprit de corps of the service, we are going to provide a uniform for every single keeper, just for 2 years. After that, they have to buy their own. And the uniform consisted of a pair of straight black pants, a jacket that is to the tip of your fingers. Nowadays, men cup their hand, but back then, that's the way it was. You have flap pockets. There are 10 buttons. You only see 8 because 2 are under the collar, so you can do this. A 1, often these things, sometimes they had a sterling silver 2 for second assistant, and you could unpin it if you made first class. And if you made keeper, you unpin it and put a K there. Sometimes they're totally stitched, and you had to have somebody, your wife, rip it off and sew another one on. The buttons were, depending on the era, the buttons were either a little lighthouse like this, or U.S. LHE, U.S. Lighthouse Establishment. And here's another iteration. And then there was a vest with 5 little buttons and a roll collar. And then later they got rid of the roll. It was just a non-roll collar. By the way, men didn't wear belts. If you see John Wayne in a Western in 1860 with a belt, that's not right. Hollywood's got that wrong. They had suspenders. A white shirt and either a bow tie or a 4-in-1 tie, and it depended. And then a hat with 2 little buttons on either side, and this lighthouse up here with your floral design. And then they kind of changed in the 1820s and 30s after the Bureau got into things. Right in 1821, I think it was, 20 or 21, if you had the best light station in your district, and this district for a while was Watch Hill, Rhode Island to Toms River, New Jersey, if you had all these lighthouses, if yours was the best, you didn't have any financial problems, personnel problems, the place looked squared away every time it was inspected, you got to wear this red on bronze or brass efficiency pin. It was a district inspector's efficiency pin. 4 months. You had to be the best for 4 months. And if you had the best station for 12 inspections, 3 years, you got the commissioner of the Lighthouse Service blue on sterling silver pin. But you know who did the work? Not the keeper. Probably it was kicking ass with the assistant keepers. And that's how the keeper is supposed to look. You can't really see it too well, but we got a good example over here. And then I've got some examples of the Ks and the 1s. And this, I hope this comes out, this is probably how they looked. So the workday here was, there were always, once again, it's like I showed you, it depended on the era. But let's take the golden age, which is the 19th century. It was after 1852. They'd stand watches during the night, and they were supposed to each take their turn. Generally, on the Great Lakes, you might have one family at a light station. They have a little fourth order lens. It's a one family. If the keeper's sick, the wife takes over. The kids help. Pretty simple. It's just a simple house with a lens. But if you had a bigger station with a fog signal on it, you got 4 keepers. And on the Farallons and some others, you had 5 keepers. In that case, usually they had to paint the tower inside and out. Sometimes the towers are little short guys. But for a bigger, every district had a base. And the base had a field construction force. So the field construction force would go out if you needed, once cars became in the 20s and 30s, if you needed a garage, you wrote a request and they'd send the field construction force out and they would build the garage for you. Or if you had something very tricky with that lens, or especially the clockworks, they had a lampist at every district depot. And the lampist would come out and square away your machinery. The same thing for fog signal apparatus. Eventually they went into electric motors after 1900, and they required expertise beyond the keeper's scope. So the workday was always keeping the place up. We're talking cutting the grass, if there's grass, painting the fences around it. Most of the stations had fences. What you have to do for yourself, of course, but standing watches. And we have fog in the daytime in some parts of the country, Maine and the West Coast. So you had to have somebody standing a watch. All the fog signal boilers were in duplicate. So one of them could be down, but the other always had to have a little fire going in fog signal season, just banked. And then if you could start to see the fog coming in, or you couldn't see a certain point, then you built that fire up and got it ready for the fog signal. And sometimes you had to ring a bell until you had enough steam up to blow the whistle, the fog signal. So if you had a fog and night, and you really can't see light through fog, but somebody had to be in the lantern room and somebody had to be in the fog signal station and somebody had to be sleeping. So that was a busy time. But other than that was just think of what you need to do around your house. Except that some of these stations like Point Bonita, you had the fog signal down by the water. The prevailing wind is coming across the fog signal station. So the Madrono lands 9 tons of coal. They're in 100-pound bags. You've got to take that 100 pounds of coal over to the coal room, open the bag, shuck it out, take the bag back, and pile it up waiting for the next tender to come so you can give those burlap bags back to the ship. Then you got a fog coming in, you're burning the coal, and it's creating smoke, and the smoke is blowing against the station, and all of a sudden the white walls are getting sullied, and now you got to clean the walls. So you're making work. First you work your buns off just getting the coal up there, and then you work harder shoveling it. And I mean, fog signals were a lot of work. They really were. So it's kind of like whatever you do with a regular house, and then if you have in your house, if you've got 5 buildings, they all need something. But once the Lighthouse Board came in and beyond, 1852, remember, right on up into the 30s, there were 3 ways lighthouses were designed. One was headquarters in Washington, D.C., and they designed a particular design, and anybody could use it. Let me think of one here. Well, the Outer Banks. Have you ever been down there? Currituck, Cape Hatteras? Cape Hatteras. This is an 1850 design. It's the same design, different heights, but the same design used for Cape Hatteras, Currituck, Body Island, Sand Island, Alabama, Pigeon Point, California, Yaquina Head, Oregon, and so on and so forth. Hollow walls, keeps the weight down, good for insulation, and the tops are all pretty much the same. The bases are different. Some have little oil houses down here, some don't. The other design is the district. Each district. California was one whole district. Oregon and Washington was another district. And there were 3 districts in the lakes. The district had an architect, and he would design for that district. And the other thing that's about this is important is, if you're in Maine, they're using granite. I mean, you got granite there, right? Use granite. On the Outer Banks, they use brick. On the Pacific Northwest, they use redwood, because that's what you got up there. You got redwood. So kind of like art, the architecture of the time is of the time. You'll have a Victorian, like Wildwood, New Jersey, that Victorian design. Well, that design is a California design. They built 5 out there, and they must have gotten together for some conference and said, you know, I'd kind of like to have a Victorian. I just think it'd look good in Cape May. It's sort of a vacation place for these people in the 1870s. Well, I've got one for you, Bet. I'll send you the drawing. And that's how that one got there. I'm guessing on that. There's a Cape Cod style design that they used for the first 16 on the West Coast. So that district design, and sometimes it went to other districts, but district design. Then there's the individual, where they put out a request for bids, a request for a proposal, RFP, and they say, we need a lighthouse on St. George Reef, which is a reef off of Northern California, or Minot's Ledge off of, well, that was designed by headquarters. And people come in with proposals. And a guy by the name of George Ballantyne built the Tillamook Rock Lighthouse off of scary place, off of Oregon, 1881, and then in 1882 he got the design for the one in California called St. George Reef. Took 10 years to build, most expensive lighthouse in America, 145 feet tall, 1,333 2-by-5 ton blocks just in the caisson. 1,333 just in the caisson. Fabulous. So those are the basic 3 designs that happened there. Then there's the other things, like a guy by the name of Mitchell. He was an Irishman, he was blind, and he designed the screw pile and in Ireland, and we sucked that up. And the first screw pile was Brandywine Shoal in Delaware, 1848. I could be off on the year there a little bit. And then we used screw piles throughout the Chesapeake Bay. Very efficient, easy to build. Put them together, take them apart and take them out there and build them. Architecture. People say, I went out and saw the light. Well, they mean the lighthouse, which is in a light station. And this is the lantern room, and this is the lens. And then inside the lens is a lamp. And you people call the things a bulb, but I call it a lamp because I was in the Coast Guard and we call them lamps. So you've got a lamp, a lens, a lantern room on a tower in a light station. Galleries going around the storm panes with the glass. These things are astragals. And here are the different lantern rooms. See, that's that really crude one in Salmon River up near Rochester. And here's another one before the Lighthouse Board. These things were smoky. The windows, the storm panes, excuse me, got all smoked up. But once we got the Lighthouse Board, there's an old-fashioned one with a trapezoid windows, storm panes. And this is modern, but it's got an old-fashioned ball vent. This is American here. You can tell American to the English. Wait till I show you here are the English. They have these huge bulbous lantern domes with a great big air vent on top. I can see an English lighthouse about 8 miles away. And this is English. This is English, very unusual. And they love to do this with their astragals. They think it doesn't retard the light as much because there's always some of the lens showing if you have it like this. We have a few, but not many. This is American. This is out in Delaware Bay. It's called St. John Shoal, I think. And here it is at the 1876 centennial at the Philadelphia Fairgrounds. And then they put it there to show the public, and then they took it out and put it there. This is a sweet, sweet dome here. Look at the curve on this. We've only got 3 or 4 of these in the country. There's this one, and there's one just like this in Long Island Sound, and this is Ponce Inlet down in Florida, I think. Very nice shape to it. And of course, these are the materials. They made them out of rubble stone in Maine, then cut stone, got a little more sophisticated, brick, wood, cast iron, steel, and concrete. First concrete was 1910, rebuilding Point Arena Lighthouse in Northern California. And so these are samples of the rubble stone. This is the first one built under the new federal government. It's Cape Henry, entrance to Chesapeake Bay. Authorized in 1790 and built a year later, I think, 1791 or 2. But this is how the first ones look. Look at this guy up here. What a piece of crap. And this is, I mean, they leaked, they were cold, they were damp, they were basically 2 rooms. The guy's in there with his wife and 10 kids. You know, I mean, oh God. This is Mount Desert Island. This is the first light list number 1. The sun hits this place first in the morning, first place in America. And it's wave swept during storms, wave swept. So every spring the keeper would go in for supplies and he'd bring dirt out, and they would put dirt in among the rocks, and they'd plant flowers, and they'd plant herbs and whatever you could grow. And then in the fall, the first storm would wash it away, and they'd have to bring it out the next spring. Oh God, so here it is. This is the same station with a more modern structure right here. You see how wave swept this is? Now look at this. You're way off the coast of Maine. Miserable. There's an early one by that Stephen Pleasanton. Not Stephen Pleasanton, Winslow Lewis. And when this is Wellfleet, it's out on the Cape. And when this thing gets in the wind, it starts rocking back and forth, and of course it leaks all around here. It built right on the sand, no foundation, not even a string of some sort of stone or anything. And of course it fell apart. That's Lake Champlain. They built about 8 lighthouses on Lake Champlain, federal. This is New Jersey. It's Bergen Point or something, Bergen Lighthouse. And this is, there was offshore lighthouses in the water or in rocks, and then there's lighthouses on land. And this is an example. It's a crib they had to build out in the water so they could build a lighthouse on top of it. Look at that, sweetheart. Isn't that a beauty? Victorian lighthouse. It's Fort Tompkins, which is on Staten Island, right? It used to be right up from, it's where the Navy had their pier built recently. Oh, it's not there anymore, whatever. Just north of the new Lighthouse Museum. I mean, east. They tried to build the lighthouses to kind of blend in. You know, they really thought about where it was going to the design of the era, the material of the area, and the environment in which it was constructed. So a lot of times they did that. This Jackie Boulevard, the Kennedy's family place is right up in back of here where she grew up. It's a place you can rent now for weddings at a huge price and so on.
Hammersmith Forest?
Beg your pardon?
Hammersmith Forest?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you. This is 1810 or so. It's Concord Point, rubble stone, the northernmost in Chesapeake Bay. Here's Block Island. Now here's a design. This is a district design. This is the North Lighthouse on Block Island, but they also built the exact same thing at Morgan Point, Oldfield Point, on Morgan Point over in Connecticut, Oldfield Point on Long Island, Rose Island, which is Plum Island, which is off the end of Long Island. Oh, and several others. Basically, granite, and then this part here is cast iron. That's all been restored. And then down here is the South Lighthouse. Oh, I don't have a picture of that. Here's the cast iron, little red lighthouse under the Great Gray Bridge, George Washington Bridge. And here's Cape Canaveral. This lighthouse is built with plates, and they took it out here and they plated it together. They bolted it together. And inside here are different floors. There's a place for the galley or the kitchen. There are bedrooms, living rooms, all in there. It was meant so you could ship it out to Fiji or some remote island and put it up, and you'd be completely one station and one tower. But this is cast iron, and this is Florida. In July? No, I don't think so. So they never lived here. They built 3 houses for the keepers. Here's a this is, you can't see it too well. We have too much light in here. It's a gorgeous rubble stone, Monhegan Island off of Maine, beautiful. And this is a little pier head, cast iron with this Greek Corinthian pillars, cast iron, and it's got this beautiful little denture around the top. Used to be a house attached to it way back when, and that's a private aid now. I mean, it's a local group took it over and got Coast Guard permission to put an optic in it. There's Great Lakes on the right, up near Traverse City, a big Sodus Bay. This is wood on the right, and on the left is Lake Ontario, Lake Michigan. By the way, what state do you think has the most lighthouses? No guesses?
Michigan, California.
Michigan. Yeah, Michigan. I've had members of the society say, "You were in the Coast Guard in the Great Lakes? What's the Great Lakes?" You know, Lake Superior is 425 miles long. Lake Superior is the same size as South Carolina. Coast Guard, yeah, I think so. And they had 220 lighthouses were built over the years. They're not all there now. Now here's another example. This is a fourplex, and I think, I slept here last night, I think this was a fourplex at one time. Obviously, at least a duplex, but I really think it was a fourplex. They had a fog signal station here too. So this is a fourplex, and it was brick, and this is the Point Arena Lighthouse, and it got wiped out in the earthquake it was north of San Francisco, but it got wiped out in the earthquake, or very badly damaged. They had to tear it down, and so they built this. A chimney company built it, looks like it, and this is finished, and it's all stressed it's the first concrete poured lighthouse in the United States, 1910. And now here's the Victorians I was telling you about. This was a California design. There were 4 in California and 1 up in Oregon. Yeah, Oregon, Point Adams in Oregon. And they're really, they're beautiful, beautiful structures. East Brother Island still exists. This had a female keeper on it for many, many years. Her husband drowned going ashore. He was a district inspector, commander, can't remember his name. And this is Pigeon Point. That's that 1870 design, Pigeon Point, California, same as Cape Hatteras. It's only 115 feet high. Cape Hatteras is 196. And you see here how this is hollow. It makes it lighter, cheaper, and it acts as insulation in the winter and in the summer. And this is a beauty up there near Duluth, Split Rock. That's the 1870 design. I've already talked about it. Some of the examples. And then we have other poured concrete. This was number 2 in the nation. This is Lloyd's Harbor in Long Island. And it's a little offshore, it's not very far. And they're doing a nice job fixing it up. I visited about 5 years ago. And this is here's a steel lighthouse, steel from the 30s. Manitou, maybe, no, it's Lake Michigan on the Wisconsin side. And this is ugly. It's steel tubing sheathed in aluminum. I don't know who that. What do you think of that, Bill? Is that Victorian? I don't think so. It's Sullivan Island, just north of Charleston. And it's just a window here, and then there's a rotating arrow beacon, DCB 224, 24 inches in diameter. And there's 2 of them back to back, and they have a 1,000-watt lamp, and they go around. So there are the styles. We have land-based, then you have water, standard pile, screw pile, caisson. Oh, I got to show you these. This is what you were talking about. Oh, he's gone. This is what he was talking about over on the Delaware River. And Florida, they typically would build up the ones in Florida, so if you have a storm surge, it goes right under the lighthouse. And these are the piles structure I told you about, invented by, I think his name was George Mitchell. I know it was Mitchell. And they could build these. They go out there and without the structure, and they drive these piles. They'd have a barge with a hole in it, and they have a donkey or a mule, either one, and they would drive these down, go down under there and kind of break off the top half, not break it off, but unhook it, move the barge and put another one in until they had 8 of them, and then they would do a center, and then they would do 8. And then they bring this little structure out. It's already built, but they take it apart and bring it out and put it up. And there's the screw pile. Actually screwed right into the bottom, and that's his first design on the left over in Ireland. And of course, so this guy started Gettysburg, and he oversaw these lighthouses, some of them, as well as Barnegat Inlet and Absecon, maybe Cape May. And that's Fowey Rocks. That's the last one of the reef. Those are reef lighthouses, Florida reefs. Then there's 2 kinds of caissons. There's a caisson like this, and it's hollow, and they tow it out to where they want it, and they drop it, and they fill it with rocks and concrete, put a deck on it, and build a lighthouse. Sometimes it's wood, sometimes it's iron. This is cast iron. Sometimes it's brick. And the other type of caisson is they would tow it out and drop it, go down in it and take the bottom out, and like sandhogs building the piers for the Brooklyn Bridge, they would dig down until it started to sink into the bottom. Because even in Chesapeake Bay, there's ice flows that come down. And there is one of them that wasn't pneumatic, it was just placed in place. Sharp's Island, I think it's Sharp's Island, and it's like this, because ice has pushed it over. And here's a couple of more. See, this one's brick. This is the Baltimore Lighthouse. Had an atomic energy in there for a while. In the 60s, the Coast Guard put an atomic generator in there, and they boarded it all up, and they got thinking about, you know, if some vandals broke in there, we could be in a lot of trouble. So they took it out. Anyways, you can see the caisson type in the middle, the pneumatic, how they dig down there underneath it. And then you have these that they build on a rock. That's Mile Rocks, Golden Gate, California. And in the 60s, they took the top off and threw it away. I wish the hell they'd put it in Golden Gate Park. It would have been a nice addition. And put a helicopter platform on it. And it was white for a long time. And when I was in charge of aids to navigation for Northern California, I had them paint these orange stripes on because the pilots couldn't see it in the fog. So I had them paint those on there. And this is, I have a history of lighthouses from the get-go, and it gets into these early British, and designed by Smeaton back in 1760. But this is Minot's Ledge off of Cohasset, Massachusetts. But he used the same thing, where these interlocking blocks, and they interlock both horizontally and vertically, and they put marble treenels down through it to hold it together. So when anytime the seas or the wind hit this, it actually makes it stronger, presses them in. Very efficient. This is Bergen, New Jersey. Great Lakes, a couple of the ones in the Great Lakes. This is the furthest offshore of any lighthouse in the United States. It's right about here. It's 44 miles offshore. Great Lakes are big? I didn't know that. No, it's big as South Carolina. And, beg your pardon?
Why do they have it there?
So ships won't bump into the rock. There's a big, huge shoal there. You ever hear the Fitzgerald, you know, the song? You know, a lot of those went down. That was the only one anybody knows about because they wrote the song. In fact, I had the watch before it went down, about 5 years before it went down in Cleveland. And I was a FIDO, fill-in duty officer, and this guy, because I was in aids to navigation. So one of the other officers came in, he goes, I got a hot day. I was single. He said, I got a hot day tonight. Do you mind if you take the watch? And I'll pick up for you. He said, November, nothing happens in November. So I said, okay. He says, you can go in there. There's a little room where you can go to sleep. I have quartermasters in there manning the phones and stuff. So I went in there, and just about 9 o'clock, I was going to go in, hit the sack, 9:30. All of a sudden, we got phone calls that they were finding life preservers washed ashore from Lake Huron. And so we got the helicopters out, and there was some small boat station doing stuff. And it was just like the Fitzgerald, same type size. They're very thin, and so they can get through the locks, and they're 800 feet long. And it was coming down lake empty, so it started to hog, and it broke in half. And everybody died but one guy. They got on a raft, and he was way overweight, and he was under the other people, and he blew ashore in Canada across Lake Huron, and he lived. Everybody else died. You don't hear about that one. And of course, I was awake all night. And not only all night, but I was the next day, because now CBS, ABC, NBC, they're all calling in, the paper, the Plain Dealer, Times. But the one that gets the song gets remembered. Anyways, there's a huge ledge out there, and there's conjecture if that's where it went down, about there, the Fitzgerald. And they think it may have hit the ledge. Somebody else said they dove on it, and they found some hatches off. Maybe the hatch blew off in a storm, and the water got in, and it went down because it was coming down full. And this is a wooden rear range light. This is a cast iron. These are French that they can move. These are the Hudson River. And this is Saugerties. These people did a hell of a job about 20 years ago. This was pretty much abandoned. They got it from the Coast Guard, and they built a wooden structure, moved this lantern room over, cast iron, tore down the badly damaged tower, rebuilt the tower, and moved the lantern room back. And it's a B&B. You can stay there. It's right off Saugerties, New York, up near where, what was the big jazz festival? Woodstock. That's the lantern room right there. And a group is working with this, Esopus Meadows, south of West Point. And this is Hudson Athens, New York. The keeper out here had 8 kids. 8 kids back in the 1930s. So they're all, that's under a local group in Athens, New York. We visit those on our Hudson Island tour. And then you got the Little Red Lighthouse. It was never really a lighthouse. It's really a minor aid to navigation. But these kids wrote a story. They wrote to the governor and to the mayor. And after they built the George Washington Bridge, they were going to tear it down. And there's a kid's book called The Little Red Lighthouse and the Great Gray Bridge. So it's still there. But it wasn't a lighthouse. And then this is the style I was talking about that you saw on Block Island. 1868. There's a whole slew of these built in the Northeast. Single family station. And this is the first 8 on the California. It's kind of a Cape Cod style. There's one down here at Eastern Point, New Jersey, on the Delaware River. And there's a group working with it. But the first 8 on the West Coast, and before the first 8 were finished, they built 8 more of these on the West Coast. So there were 16. This is St. George Reef I was talking about, with 1,333 5 to 7 ton blocks just in the caisson. Took 10 years to build. And then day marks. These lighthouses, all you know, if you're going down the Outer Banks and they're all tall like this one, which happens to be St. Augustine, it looks just like Cape Hatteras, but it's got a red lantern room. You can't tell the difference. You can't tell which one you're seeing. So they make different shapes, different colors for the lighthouses. Now that one on the left is Canada, and they have a lot of snow up there, so it's red, so you can make it out. And there's another Outer Banks there, Body Island. And the Currituck is brick, so it's okay brick because the others are colored. And then that's Cape Lookout on the right, which is diamond shape. Actually, Cape Hatteras is supposed to be diamond shape, and somebody screwed up because right off of Cape Hatteras is Diamond Shoals. And then there's that St. George Reef. This was a lighthouse that looked like this. And sometime in the 30s, they got the idea that they wanted to memorialize Champlain. This is at the end of Lake Champlain, south end. So they they got permission to alter this lighthouse, and this is what it looks like today, to make it a memorial to Champlain. And these are, oh, that's a beautiful lighthouse, but it got hit in the 38 hurricane. Can't think of it at the moment. I'll think of it probably. Bradford Point. Braddock Point. It's right in the middle of Narragansett Bay. And look at the outhouse hanging off the edge here. In fact, all of those in the Chesapeake Bay, those screw pile lighthouses, they all have a lighthouse an outhouse out here. Can you imagine what that's like in the winter with the wind blowing through there? Yeah, that one was right here in Narragansett Bay. And of course we have erosion. This is Tucker Beach, New Jersey. And here's there's Tucker Beach. That's all pretty well eroded away. It was kind of an islet there. And here it is going over. Isn't that a great series of photographs? A guy was out there with his son one day. They just went for a walk on the beach. And he just happened to be, they heard it started to go, and he got his camera out. So that's architecture.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.